Good morning and welcome. I'm Jim Boswell, your host at Vision in Action Live and the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life. Today we have a presentation on motivations at work and a discussion with Dr. Carolyn Goerner, faculty chair and clinical professor of management at Kelley School of Business in Indiana University at Bloomington. She's an author and also an expert in graduate business education and negotiation. We look forward to hearing what she has to say. Carrying on, we're going to look today at motivations at work, in which we take a look at the changing state of motivations at work dating back to 1850. To start off with, let's take a look at some snapshots about work and the people at work and their expectations. Back in 2023, we had about 132 full-time employed workers in the United States, 100 million of which, or that's 76% of those, are all knowledge workers, people who think for a living in the process of doing their job. In point of fact, compared to 1900, when mostly it was repetitive manufacturing, this is a massive change. If we look further, in 2021, Mr. Scott Castle on Fortune magazine quoted that there are 1 billion knowledge workers across the globe whose jobs specifically require them to combine action with a level of domain expertise, in other words, their knowledge, and to generate value and make critical decisions. So that tells us where we're headed and how work is looking. More recently, HP did a research project with 15,000 workers, and it's called the Work Relationship Index. But the problem here is they found that only 27% of the global knowledge workers have a healthy relationship with work. So although we're changing, it looks like it's a bit of a bumpy road. Goerner, who does forecasting quite a bit, also noticed that for knowledge workers, globally, 39% will work in a hybrid fashion by the end of 2023. Well, being 2024, we're probably there. Also globally, only about 9% will work fully remote, as contrasted to the US, where 51% will be working hybrid and 20% will be fully remote. And of course, I think we all have the sense that the COVID epidemic helped us move this along. And the businesses we do today require knowledge workers, which is quite different. So let's look at this a little further. So what are motivations at work? Human motivations have been changing. So the new challenge now is to allow personal fulfillment, family, business, institutions, work, and nations to find a better balance. The rewards and punishment management methods of the 1850 Industrial Revolution really aren't appropriate to this at this point, especially in the United States. And it's not appropriate for us moving forward at all. And in fact, they're detrimental and counterproductive. So let's look in more detail about how that might work. So let's just look back at what it was. The Type X workers, that's a nomenclature used by Daniel Pink, describes the repetitious work and extrinsic rewards of the Industrial Revolution, where management managed people on repetitive tasks with very close supervision. The focus was based on work optimization, and specialization was an imperative. And compensation was based on individual performance, not group performance. And it tended to encourage short-term thinking. And as the stock market grew, stock market then began to reinforce that short-term thinking. Daniel Pink of Drive, which is a book you might want to take a look at, talks about this. And his contention is that Type X workers, it really kills intrinsic human motivations, whatever they are. It discourages peak performance. It crushes creativity, and it crowds out good behaviors. And it incidentally encourages unethical behavior, addictive habits, short-term thinking. Well, this is antithetical to our knowledge worker base as we move forward because they're looking at intrinsic rewards. They want to be self-directed. They want to express themselves through work. They certainly want to have an environment in which they can be productive. They are intentionally flexible, and they're looking for well-planned work and execution. Within this framework, it allows for individuals to be creative, to remain authentic, and to do some autonomous decision making that positively impacts the business. And skilled people generally revel in their work in this kind of environment. And this is where life is reaffirming as opposed to being a drudge. And we bring certain mindsets that are very popular in the public domain, like grit, perseverance, resilience, and flow, to this kind of a working environment. So, how does knowledge work actually happen? If we take this a little further from the description I just gave you, we look at the fact that the worker is now self-determined and self-directed. That's kind of unusual and certainly not in conjunction or in conformance to the old repetitive manufacturing notion. There is minimum to no management involvement. In other words, management flies at a point where they just kind of set agreed goals, and it's up to the team and the flexible working of their workmates to make that happen. And the workers sort of tend to determine their own tasking at this point, which allows them a lot of flexibility in terms of task time, what technique they're going to use, what teams are relevant to get the job accomplished. And the workers within this environment, again, are free to be authentic and work autonomously. And it's expected that people that do well in this environment can be joyful in their work. And oddly enough, it's best accomplished with the calmer B-type personality people as opposed to A-type drivers, which are so often talked about. So some of the methodology for improving motivations can include a couple of things like this. One is where 20% of work hours are devoted to the individual in unstructured work, where the individual thinks there's interest to follow. And it's another way for the company to enhance its new product and service offerings over time, to resolve problems and capitalize on opportunities, and to conduct informal research and development. On the other hand, businesses can move away from individual recognition and extrinsic rewards like money and awards and time off to more intrinsic by looking at a results-only work environment. This is where the team is paramount and the individual winds up secondary to the team's rewards and accomplishments. So to encapsulate Mr. Pink's promotion, I'm going to walk you through this diagram. It's not as hard as it looks. So what it says is there's methods, motivation 2 and motivation 3. Motivation 3 is the one where it's intrinsic rewards. It's more toward the bottom there. And motivation 2 is at the top where it's more about just simply getting a job done. So this flow diagram allows you to ask the question, is the task routine? Well, if it's not, then you're down in motivation 3 along the bottom, and we'll come back to that in a minute. If it is, then it gives you the opportunity to ask, okay, can we increase this task challenge or its variety, or make it less routine, or link it to a larger purpose? If the answer is yes, it can become motivation 3. If not, well, then it's simply motivation 2, and it's about extrinsic awards. In other words, money, promotions, things like that for an individual. And it tends to drive it to the individual. And so what you do there is acknowledge the fact that this isn't what the work that we would want it to be, but we discuss the task necessity anyway. We acknowledge that the task may in fact be boring, and we allow the workers to complete the task in their own way. So this is what we would do in the modern world for knowledge workers. So let's look at the bottom. If either of those couple of questions about the task being routine, or if it can be elevated, so to speak, then you're looking at a healthy long-term motivational environment where you're paying people fairly, you foster the autonomy, mastery, and purpose that is a great development environment for a team and for individuals in teams. And if then rewards, so you consider unexpected, not contingent, now that you've accomplished something, kind of rewards instead. So the rewards are praise and feedback. They're not necessarily monetary, they're not necessarily time off, but these rewards are not ones that you can spend. They're more in the recognition, pat on the back arena. And the rewards provide useful information rather than an attempt to control the process. Managers often are taught, hey, I've got to control the process, I've got to set out the schedule, all of that. We're giving that over to the employee team. So let's wrap this up with a few conjectures. 16% worldwide and 75% in the US are knowledge workers. And they're expecting more the intrinsic reward environment that lets workers deliver greater value to their employees. The extrinsic rewards are still good for repetitive work. If you're manufacturing clothing in Southeast Asia, that's the extrinsic rewards of time off, money, and benefits are definitely the way it should go. And we probably don't expect that to change. But can we live with that continued type of focus and the short-term objectives that go with it for knowledge workers? And this is part of the rub in the current workplace about flexibility, work-life balance, et cetera. And workplace controversies are likely to continue as we work our way through this situation. So if you're interested, get more details on the Motivations at Work newsletter, which you can find on lifelongfulfillment.com. We think you will find that enlightening. Now's the time in our program when we hear from point solution subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives. Today's discussion is going to be around graduate business education. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Carolyn Goerner. She's faculty chair and clinical professor of management at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University at Bloomington, and an expert in graduate business education and negotiating. She's also an author of multiple courses, things like Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, Developing Empathy at Work, Gender and Negotiation, Advanced Negotiating Tips, Icebreakers, Women in Leadership, and Presenting Your Best Self at Work. I recommend that one. Anyway, thank you today for joining us, Dr. Goerner, at Vision in Action Live. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
I am absolutely excited to be with you. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, great. If there's anything I missed in the introduction that you'd like to amplify on or correct, please feel free to do so.
I think the only things I would add is that I'm a dog mom with an addiction to live theater and big Green Bay Packers fan.
Okay. All right. All right. So why don't we dig into this? What is your recommended, with your experience, what's your recommended process for those that are considering further business education beyond that, beginning bachelor's degree? Maybe you can take us down that thought process.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing we always ask people is, what are you hoping the degree does for you? In terms of what you would like to be, where you want to evolve to in the organization, what is it that you're looking for this to be a stepping stone to? And the reason that I start there is that depending on the degree you choose, you'll learn really different things, and that'll position you to be in very different places. So if somebody says to me, Carolyn, I am a finance person, finance is what I love, I'm going to stay in finance, and I just want to know everything there is to know, then my response to them would be terrific. A Master of Science in Finance is for you, because that will allow you to get this deep level of knowledge in a single area. On the other hand, if someone comes to me and says, Carolyn, I want to run a company, or I want to start a company, or I'm interested in being, higher in the organization, then I'm going to step back and say, well, you probably want to think about an MBA, because that's a broader view of how business works and even goes into the global perspectives. And so at that point, we would encourage somebody to say, let's start to get you to think more holistically about the organization and more holistically about how it competes within its marketplace. And that is more the systems view of thinking, how things come together.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I find is that people are kind of naturally gravitating towards the depth or the breadth. And starting there allows me to give them better advice than just saying, this is the better degree, because it really does depend.
I see. Okay. And are there other alternatives to the traditional MS or MBA whereby I can self-educate? Are there other avenues?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, a lot of schools are now offering what we call graduate certificates. So they're anywhere from 3 to 4 classes, and they'll allow you to sort of dip your toe in the water. They're still credit bearing. You still get a diploma, but it just isn't quite as much of that, hands-on investment. And again, most of our major colleges and universities offer at least some of that online. And so you would have the opportunity to take those at your own pace, not have to give up your life for a year or two and move somewhere in order to be immersed in that. But on the other hand, there's also the option of professional certificates or even digital badges that can make a huge difference in how people are perceived in the workplace. Those are typically offered either through people who are professional trainers, professional training associations, or a lot of universities offer these kinds of services as well. I know we do here at Indiana University. And that essentially is, here's the topic area. So let's say you're interested in project management. And so we would say, all right, here is a short course in project management. You could take that online or you could take that live. It would be about 10 to 12 hours of actual class time. And then at that point, if you wanted to sit for one of the project management exams, you would be set to do that. And you would also then get not just your certificate, but a series of digital badges that would talk about the things that you are now able to do, the skills that we've now measured along the way. Right. And so we're finding that those micro credentials are really popular, especially for people who have that quest for lifelong learning, because they don't have to commit more than 8-10 weeks to a particular topic. They can kind of create or curate their own degree or their own learning process.
That's an interesting thought. Create your own degree. Yeah. Okay. And one of the questions, that I'm sure comes to the fore is also the issue about return on investment, in terms of time, money, and how many resources I'm going to have to bring to bear to make my goals come to fruition.
And that is an absolutely important thing to put into the equation as well. I think one of the things that people typically like about the online options is they can continue to work full time. They don't have to uproot their lives. It takes a bit longer, or it can take a bit longer, but you've also not had that sense of, I've had to give up everything to go to school. So the investment is a little lighter, but the return actually comes out to be the same. 10 years ago, I would have said people aren't really taking online degrees seriously. The reality is that now they absolutely are. Our online MBA degree called Kelly Direct is the best in the world. I can't believe they let me play in the sandbox. It's crazy good. But in 2020, Poets and Quants, which is a magazine, anyone interested in graduate education and business, I strongly recommend a subscription. It's free. But the publication is Poets and Quants. And they name what they kind of think of as the MBA of the year. And they selected our online MBA as the MBA of the year. So people are starting to take this idea of you can get a really solid education and really interactive experiences in an online format. And so I think that is opening up a lot of opportunities because you've got folks who don't have to move their family, sacrifice work in order to be able to take advantage of those opportunities.
I see.
So that doesn't, I'm sorry, that was a sidetrack. To answer your question more directly, the investment really does, excuse me, the return really does vary on the investment. And it's one of those situations where the more expensive degrees are correlated with higher salaries when you're done. It's just kind of the reality. So the full MBA, and particularly an MBA from a prestigious or say top 50 school, is going to have a higher increase, average increase in salary after graduation than one that is just a master's program, or one that is maybe in a smaller place, not as highly ranked, et cetera. So, and of course, those are going to be more expensive. So most of the time, and this is my advice to anyone considering schools, that data should be readily available, and the school should provide it to you readily, that says, here's what the average increase in our students' salaries was. And in fact, recently, Poets and Quants published a survey of the best ROI on MBA degrees. And so it's something that people track. And if that's something you really want to do the math with, that data are available, and people just need to be sure to ask for it, because it really does keep the universities honest.
Well, that's good. For those of us on the outside looking to do this, that's very helpful. It really is. One of the things I wanted to ask too is, when is it best to do this? Is it best to simply roll from your bachelor's degree into one of these programs, or is it best to go out and get some work experience and validate your thoughts about business before you reinvest, shall we say? What are you seeing?
Generally, for the MS degrees, the average student's younger. So we will see people with maybe 1 to 2 years of experience after their bachelor's degree starting in those functional master's programs. And usually that's because your career trajectory will be, I want to advance in my functional area of marketing or finance or whatever that might be. I want to advance in that first, and then I'll get to leadership positions that start to make me have to think bigger, have to think more strategically. Most of our MBA students, and this is just the nationwide average here in the US, most MBA students have anywhere from 7 to 15 years experience, just sort of depending on where they are in their career. Some folks took longer being technically in their safe zone because they really are good at it and liked it. Other folks have a more meteoric rise, and so they're starting that kind of thinking faster. But whenever you get to the point where you either are put into or start desiring a leadership position that's going to require that broader view of the world and that broader view of the organization, that's a good time to think about the MBA. And it's, whenever I am faced with really having to be responsible for the profits and losses of a unit, or I really have to be conscious of how my customers are acting, what my supply chain looks like, those kinds of things. At that point, whenever that might be, it's a good time to step back and think MBA.
I see. Okay. And isn't it true that if you're working, many companies will help support an MBA initiative?
They will. And in fact, if your company does not do this, strongly suggest that you do. And if you'd like, if you want to convince your company and would like some data, my email is goerner@iu.edu, and I'll be more than happy to send you the research around how that return on investment helps companies. It is the case that companies will, to the limit that they're allowed by the tax code, support companies or support individuals as they're going through school, usually as the form of a reimbursement. So you finish your class with, some companies will say there's a grade minimum. So usually it's a B or better. And if you finish that class with a B or better, then they'll reimburse you for the tuition paid.
Well, sounds like a good deal.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is.
just for context, I went through an MBA at the University of Arizona after 6 years in Navy submarines. So I had done the undergrad work back to MBA process. And I did see quite a bit of advancements once I got into Silicon Valley because of that MBA and the translation of skills into more business format. So,
Well,
uh,
first, for service. And second, we see a lot of folks transitioning from the military coming into the MBA program for exactly the reason you described, because it helps them translate their experience into business language.
yeah, yeah.
So I was born on an army base, but it's the other branch, we're okay. But regardless of what branch the folks are coming in from,
Mhm.
there really is just I watch their confidence blossom after a couple of years in the program because they see how what they've done and learned and accomplished translates out of the military environment and into that business context. And so that kind of transition is an excellent time for someone to think about it.
Right. So, is this the kind of advice at any given university that the counseling department would have for a student, say, who's, becoming a senior, getting ready to look at employment or more education or whatever? What's best for them to expect in terms of help?
Honestly, it depends. That's going to vary a lot depending on the school that
Mhm.
someone's doing for the undergraduate degree. If you are talking with someone who knows the market pretty well, essentially this may sound a little backwards, but the first thing they're going to ask is, how are your job prospects? And if the student says, I've got some great options, I feel like I've got a place where I could be happy for the next 3 years or so, then typically it's go do that. Go get the experience, go try to find that, kind of find a little bit of your feet first, and then you'll get more out of that master's degree because you'll have something to immediately apply it to. On the other hand, my undergraduate degrees were in philosophy and religion, and there weren't a whole lot of different things that were particularly job wise available.
Right.
And so, because I was lucky enough to know that I wanted to go into consulting, and I was able to do that. But I know for a lot of folks, you come with a degree that you passionately love, and then realize that the opportunities may not be what you thought they were. And if that's the case, then a lot of universities have just a 1 year master's program that are designed for people to go into immediately after they graduate. And
Mhm.
that can one extra year that can do wonders for job prospects.
Oh, okay. Good. So I noticed that a number of your multiple courses that you've worked in uh, get into how to deal with the public, icebreakers, interpersonal communications, you know, getting into certainly women's focused in leadership and stuff like that. So why don't we look at a few of those? One of them is negotiating. It seems like you're a negotiator par excellence. What is empathetic negotiation, and where does that come into play for somebody who's taken the graduate education route?
Love the way that you phrase that. Thank you. The empathic negotiation doesn't always come into play. Not going to lie. There are times when it is just about money, and we know we're going to haggle, and that's just sort of what this will be. However, those kinds of relationships aren't as common as we might think. And in fact, what we're now starting to realize is that if the negotiators develop a relationship with one another, and if both parties walk away feeling like they were heard and understood, and that they got something they wanted out of the exchange, a lot of really good things happen. So the deals are easier to implement. People are more likely to come back and do business with that individual again. And people just feel better about the whole exchange. There's just a psychological benefit there as well. And so, when I first started teaching negotiation, most people thought that immediately I was going to be one of those hardcore fisticuffs, just let's come in and talk price. And I realized pretty quickly that that is a style of negotiation that is what people are afraid of when they say they dread negotiation. They're afraid that it's going to be confrontational and negative, and then they're going to be taken advantage of. And so one of the best experiences is to be able to come into something that you think is going to scare you and then leave saying, well, that was actually pretty cool. And so that's what brought me to the empathic negotiation piece. And it's a sense of, if I'm going to get a really good deal, if I'm going to make a deal with this person that we can both be happy with and live with, well, I need to know enough about them and understand enough about their position to make sure that what we're doing makes sense for both of us. And so that means getting to know someone. That means understanding the underlying needs that they have. And sometimes it means I've got to help them tell a story so that when this negotiation is over, they look like a hero, because they have to go back and tell their boss, their family, whoever it might be, about this deal. And I want them to feel really good about telling that story. And so helping the other side get a win is a terrific way to not only come and come to some great agreements, as long as you can hold true to what it is you need as well, then you've got a good sense of, we accomplished something pretty cool here, as opposed to that hurt.
Right. Right. A little more digital than this is what I need and this is what I can do, right?
Absolutely. Much less transactional.
Yeah. The phrase imposter syndrome, I'm not sure everybody understands what that might be. Maybe you could walk us through that.
Glad to do that. Imposter syndrome is that belief that you're faking it, and more important, or not more important, but I think more poignantly, it's that feeling of looking around the room and thinking, I don't belong here. And if everybody else really knew what I was or what I knew or what I could do, they would make me leave. It's that sense of that little voice inside your head that just says, you can't do this. You are not ready. You are not talented. You are not whatever it might be. And the good news is that most people are able to feel the fear and do it anyway. Tom Hanks doesn't think he can show emotion on every movie. Tina Fey doesn't think she's funny. So obviously, these are people who talked about their imposter syndrome feelings and yet keep diving in. And most folks do that. But the reality is that 70% of us have felt those feelings at some time. And for about a quarter of those people, it could have resulted in not applying for a job, or not joining a class, or not staying with an activity. And that's where it really becomes a problem. It's when the little voice wins.
It really gets in your way. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. Do you have any parting words for our audience?
I think the thing that I love the most, Jim, about what you do is this idea of be purposeful, set some goals, move forward, but do that in a way that allows you the freedom to explore. And that's such a marvelous place to be. I think when you go through life saying, I need to check this box and check this box and get good at this, you lose so much of the beauty and so many of the random opportunities along the way. And so instead, just changing that wording to, I'm going to learn a little bit about this. I'm going to go learn a little bit more about that, really does open up so many possibilities. And if you're not that great at it, awesome. It just means you get to learn longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's exciting. Just to recap, if people want to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, LinkedIn is the easiest way. My courses are published there, and that's certainly the easiest way to find me. I've also got really easy email address. And so it's just my last name at iu.edu. So indianauniversity.edu. And just be sure to let me know where it is that you that you learned about me, and I'll be able to say thank you to Jim.
Thank you, Dr. Goerner. It's been a pleasure having you on board today. You've
Appreciate the time.
really opened my eyes. So that's our podcast for the day. We want to thank our guest today, Dr. Goerner, for her insights. And we want to thank each and every one of you for attending Vision in Action Live today. We hope you found it interesting. I know I did. Vision in Action Live podcasts are every week, and they include important personal development material and interviews with subject matter experts and people already leading self-directed lives. So check out the newsletters, the book Lifelong Fulfillment, and collateral materials at lifelongfulfillment.com. You'll find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, on YouTube, in other podcasts, and on KFRED Radio. I'm Jim Boswell, your host. Your comments and questions are very welcome. Just send them to Jim at lifelongfulfillment.com. Till the next episode of Vision in Action Live, have a splendid week.